The north wind swept across the dry Texas pasture, sharp enough to sting the skin, cold enough to make December feel heavier than usual. At the edge of the old Dawson ranch, with the barn door rattling behind him, Elias Dawson stood with both hands on his knees, breathing hard, searching the ground as if the earth itself might answer him. Dust clung to his boots. Frost glimmered on the brittle grass. His heartbeat thudded louder than the wind. The small silver cross necklace, his mother's heirloom, the only thing she left him before she passed, was gone. He'd noticed it missing only minutes earlier while repairing the fence line, when his gloved hand brushed his chest and found nothing but the rough wool of his jacket. Panic had risen in him so fast it felt like the world sank under his feet. That necklace had survived droughts, storms, and generations. And now, a few days before Christmas, somewhere on this wide, unforgiving land, it was lost. Elias dropped to his knees again, fingers trembling as he moved the frozen grass aside. Somewhere behind him, the horses snorted at the cold, and a lonely cowbell echoed faintly from the far pasture. Every sound felt distant compared to the hollow ache inside his chest. He whispered, voice breaking, "Lord, not this. Please, not this." The wind didn't answer. Only the emptiness did. A gust of air lifted his hat and rolled it across the dirt, as if mocking him. Elias closed his eyes, feeling the weight of grief, of memory, of something precious slipping away. But it didn't start there. We must go back a little in time. If this story is already touching your heart, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. And tell me in the comments. I believe God restores what is lost. Long before the cold December wind swept across the Dawson ranch, the days still carried the soft warmth of late autumn. The mornings began with the slow creak of the screen door, the scent of fresh hay, and the low murmuring of cattle waking under the pale Texas dawn. Life out there flowed like an old hymn, steady, familiar, humble. Elias Dawson had lived all of his 48 years on that ranch, on the same land his grandparents once worked, with calloused hands and quiet faith. He moved with the same patient rhythm they'd taught him: rise before the sun, tend to the animals, mend what was broken, thank God for what wasn't. Inside the modest ranch house, its wooden floors worn soft by generations, hung a framed photograph of his mother, Martha Dawson. Her smile was gentle and strong, the kind that made a child feel safe from every storm. Around her neck in that photo glimmered the very same silver cross Elias now carried, or used to carry. Back then, in the warmer months, he'd touch that necklace lightly each morning before heading out, as if checking in with her. A simple habit, but it grounded him. It reminded him of her favorite saying, "Son, faith is like a fence. It won't hold unless you keep up with it." His days passed with the same quiet grace. He spoke little, but listened much. His closest companions were the animals who understood his rhythms without words. Daisy, the old milk cow who nudged him when she wanted attention. Rust, his chestnut horse with a patient soul, and the scattered chickens that strutted around like noisy neighbors. A couple of times a week, his longtime friend and neighbor, Caleb Turner, stopped by to share coffee and stories. Caleb was a talker, good-natured, loud, always laughing, but Elias enjoyed the company. On those mornings, they'd sit on the porch steps, boots in the dust, coffee steaming in tin cups. Caleb would say things like, "Elias, one day you're gonna let somebody else take care of you. This ranch ain't meant to be lived on by just one man." Elias always smiled, slow and quiet. "I reckon the Lord will tell me when that day comes." Caleb would shake his head, muttering something about stubborn cowboys. But beneath the simple routines, something subtle had already begun to shift. It started with the wind, restless earlier than usual, as if whispering warnings across the plains. Some mornings, Elias found the cattle more skittish than normal, staring toward the horizon with uneasy eyes. Other days, tools he'd always kept in perfect order seemed to go missing for a few hours, only to turn up in odd places. He told himself it was just age catching up with him, or maybe he'd been working too hard. But deep down, a quiet unease pressed on him. One evening, while mending a gate near the back pasture, he paused, noticing how still everything had become. The sun was sinking, painting the land gold. Even the cicadas were quieter than usual. He whispered to himself, "Feels like something is coming." Rust, his horse, lifted its head sharply, ears pointed toward the far fence line. Elias followed the gaze but saw nothing unusual, only the long stretch of land fading into dusk. A few nights later, he dreamed of his mother. She stood under the big oak tree behind the barn, her dress fluttering in a wind he couldn't feel. She looked at him with a tenderness that broke him open, holding the silver cross necklace in her hands. When she spoke, her voice sounded like both a whisper and a warning. "Hold close what matters, Elias. The world can take things when you're not looking." He woke with a jolt, sweat on his brow despite the chill, heart pounding like hooves against the earth. The next morning, he spent a long time cleaning the necklace. It wasn't fancy, just a simple silver cross, but to Elias it was weightier than gold. His mother had worn it through every joy and hardship, every prayer and every storm. She had pressed it into his hands the night before she died, saying, "When trouble comes, let this remind you, the Lord never lets go." He'd worn it every day since, but now, as Christmas neared, the ranch felt different, lighter in some ways, heavier in others. He couldn't explain it, even to Caleb. Something invisible, something not yet named, had begun to move across his life like a long shadow before sundown. Little did he know, before the cold December morning where he fell to his knees searching for the necklace, a quiet chain of events had already been set in motion, one that would test his faith, his memories, and the very foundation of what he believed. And it would all lead back to that simple silver cross. As November eased its way toward winter, Elias found himself lingering more often near the old wooden shelf in his mother's room, the room he had kept exactly as she left it. The quilt she had stitched by hand still lay neatly folded at the foot of the bed. Her Bible, worn soft at the edges, rested on the nightstand with a sprig of dried lavender tucked inside its pages. And on that shelf stood a small wooden box that once held her most cherished things. The silver cross necklace had always been kept inside that box until she gave it to him. It was her last gift, her last blessing. And in the quiet of that room, Elias would sometimes reach for the empty box, running his fingers along the smooth grooves carved by his grandfather decades earlier. Lately, he'd begun feeling a tug, something he hadn't felt in years, a pull toward Christmas, toward tradition, toward memory. He started thinking about restoring the ranch house for the season, just as his parents used to do, a simple wreath on the door, a small wooden nativity he remembered carving with his father, and perhaps even inviting folks from the small church in town for Christmas Eve cider. He wasn't a man who asked for much. His dream was humble, almost shy, to bring the ranch back to life for Christmas. One more time. He wanted the house filled with warmth again, with prayer, with the sound of people singing hymns by the fireplace. He wanted the land to feel like home instead of a quiet monument to the dead. And deep down, though he barely admitted it to himself, he wanted to feel close to his mother again, closer than he had in years. One cold morning, he carried a small lantern and stepped into the storage shed behind the barn. Dust sparkled in the slanted sunlight as he opened old crates filled with forgotten decorations. Wooden stars, faded ribbons, a few cracked ornaments he still refused to throw away. There, at the bottom of a crate, he found something that made him stop breathing for a moment. A tiny metal hook, part of the necklace clasp he used to fix for his mother whenever it bent. He remembered her soft laughter. "Elias, you've got hands gentler than you think." He sat on an overturned bucket, turning the little hook in his fingers. A simple piece of metal, but it stirred memories like dust rising from an old trail. He whispered, "Mama, I'm trying. I really am." Then, as always, he turned to prayer. He bowed his head right there in that cold shed, lantern flickering beside him. "Lord, it's been a long time since this place felt alive. I don't need much, just a little guidance, a little light. Help me make Christmas mean something again. Help me honor what she taught me." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It held a kind of stillness that felt almost like being held. And though the wind outside rattled against the shed, a faint warmth seemed to settle in his chest, slow and steady. He opened his eyes and looked at the hook again. A tiny, almost insignificant piece of metal. But it meant something, and he didn't know why. The dream formed fully then, quiet, steady, gentle as a Texas sunrise. This Christmas, he would restore not just the ranch, but the connection to everything his mother had built with faith and grit. He would bring life back into the home, light back into the rooms, and hope back into the land. It felt right. It felt God-led. Yet even as he made this promise to himself, a shadow of fear pressed in, soft but persistent. What if he couldn't do it alone? What if time had already taken too much? What if the past couldn't be reclaimed? He shook the thoughts off. Faith, his mother always said, wasn't about seeing clearly, it was about stepping forward anyway. With the tiny clasp hook still in his hand, Elias stood, breathed deep, and whispered, "I'll try, Lord. You lead. I'll follow." He didn't yet know that this small dream and this small object would be tested harder than he ever imagined. The first winter storm rolled in earlier than usual that year, sweeping across the Texas plains with a sharpness that bit into everything it touched. By the first week of December, the Dawson Ranch felt heavier, weather-worn, wind-tired, and stretched thin under the pressure of the season. Elias felt it too. It began with the fences, old wood cracking, wire snapping loose, posts leaning like tired old men. Every morning brought a new section to mend, and each new task seemed to chip away at the time he hoped to spend restoring the house for Christmas. One morning, after wrestling with a stubborn fence corner for nearly an hour, Elias stepped back, wiped his brow, and felt something inside him sag with fatigue. "Mercy," he muttered. "Feels like this land's trying to outrun me." Rust, his horse, nudged his shoulder as if offering comfort. Elias patted his neck, whispering, "At least you're steady, old friend." But even Rust seemed on edge these days, skittish, pacing more than usual, ears twitching at sounds only animals seemed to hear. By late afternoon, clouds rolled over the sky in thick grey layers. The air smelled of dust and cold metal. Birds flew low, cutting across the fields with restless wings. Something in the atmosphere pressed against the ranch like a warning. Inside the barn, Elias worked on repairing the old lanterns he planned to hang on the porch. Simple work, comforting work. But his hands trembled more than they used to, not from age, he wasn't that old, but from a worry he couldn't quite name. Every few minutes, he reached for the silver cross at his chest, and every time, it was there. A steady, reassuring weight. He didn't know that soon. He'd reach for it and feel nothing at all. The next morning broke colder than the others. Frost clung to every surface, fences, rails, branches, tools. Even the air seemed stiff. Elias stepped outside and felt a strange hollowness, like the ranch was holding its breath. He had planned to clean out the old fireplace, sand down the mantel, and bring in some pine greenery to fill the house with the scent of Christmas. But before he could start any of that, he noticed something unsettling. One of the cattle gates was wide open. He froze. "Lord, not today," he whispered. It wasn't like him to leave gates open. He checked them out of habit, almost without thinking. Yet there it hung, swung wide, swaying in the cold breeze. Tracks in the frozen dirt told him the cattle had wandered. He followed them across the pasture until he found 3 of the younger cows milling near a patch of mesquite. Getting them back wasn't difficult, but it took time, precious time. As he herded them slowly toward the gate, frustration rose in him. Hot, unwelcome, surprising. He muttered, "How am I supposed to do everything alone, Lord? One man can only do so much." The words echoed out across the empty pasture. For the first time in a long while, he felt something dangerous creeping into his heart, discouragement. When he finally closed the gate and secured it twice over, he leaned against the post, chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. The cold stung his lungs. His hands ached. A sharp knot tightened between his ribs. He bowed his head. "Why does everything feel harder this year? I'm just trying to honor Mama. Just trying to bring this place back to life. If this is the right thing to do, why is it so heavy?" The wind answered only with silence. That evening, he sat at the kitchen table with his mother's Bible open in front of him. A small lamp glowed beside him, casting warm light over the worn pages. He traced her handwritten notes with his fingertip, verses she had underlined, names she'd prayed for, dates she never explained. The house creaked softly in the cold. He whispered, "Mama, how'd you stay so strong? How'd you keep believing when everything fought back?" He read a verse she had circled long ago. "Be still and know that I am God." Elias closed his eyes. The stillness felt far away. For a moment, he wanted to stop, to give up the dream, to accept that maybe Christmas this year would be quiet and empty like too many years before. But then he thought of her voice, gentle, steady, unshaken. "Don't let the wind decide your faith, son." He breathed in slowly, out even slower. "You keep going," he told himself. "You mend one fence, you fix one lantern, you take one step." Yet the next days didn't get easier. A water pipe burst beneath the house. An old tool snapped clean in half. The weather turned harsher. The animals grew restless, and every night exhaustion pressed on him like a weight. Some nights, he fell asleep in the chair by the fireplace, boots still on, too tired to even pull a blanket over himself. Other nights, he sat on the porch, hands clasped, whispering prayers into the cold air. "Lord, I trust you, but I'm starting to feel worn thin. Please, give me strength." His faith bent, strained, stretched, but it did not break. Not yet. And then came the morning that would change everything. The morning he reached for his mother's cross and found only an empty space where it should have been. A hollow, terrifying emptiness. The first trial had only prepared him. The real storm, both in the land and in his heart, was about to rise. Elias didn't sleep the night the necklace went missing. He sat at the edge of his bed, boots still on, elbows resting on his knees, staring at the floor as though the cross might somehow appear there. Every few minutes, he'd rub the empty space on his chest, over and over, as if trying to understand how it had vanished. By sunrise, he already knew the truth sitting heavy in his gut. The necklace hadn't simply fallen. Something wasn't right. Still, he forced himself to begin the day the way he always did, checking the animals, feeding the horses, walking the fence line. But everything around him felt wrong. Rust paced in his stall, ears pinned back, the cattle bunching together restlessly, even the chickens scattered nervously from shadows that weren't there. The ranch felt unsettled, and so did Elias. It wasn't long before trouble arrived on horseback, loud, overconfident, and exactly the kind of man trouble tends to choose as a messenger. Jeremiah Collins, owner of the neighboring ranch, trotted up to Elias just as he was tightening a fence post. Jeremiah was younger by about a decade, slick-tongued, quick, smiled, and always ready to turn someone else's hardship into his own advantage. He called out through the cold morning air, "Morning there, Elias. Heard things ain't running so smooth for you lately." Elias stiffened. He didn't turn. "What do you need, Jeremiah?" Jeremiah chuckled. "Now, don't be like that. Just checking in on my neighbor. Heard a few cattle got loose. Heard you've been running behind on repairs. Heard you're stretching yourself real thin." He leaned forward on the saddle, voice dropping lower. "And I heard you lost something mighty important." Elias froze. Slowly, he lifted his head. Jeremiah's smile widened like a blade. "Yeah," he continued. "Someone mentioned seeing you crawling around your pasture yesterday. Looked like you were searching for something. Precious, maybe." Elias kept his voice steady, though something cold, uneasy, slid beneath his ribs. "What are you trying to say?" "Oh, nothing," Jeremiah shrugged. "Just always sad when a man starts losing things, especially family things. Once they're gone, they ain't coming back." Elias's jaw tightened. Jeremiah saw it, enjoyed it. Then he played his hand. "Tell you what," he said, adjusting his reins. "If things at your place are getting too much, I'm willing to buy that north pasture off you. You know, to take some weight off your shoulders. Make life a little easier." Elias straightened. "That land's not for sale." Jeremiah clicked his tongue. "Everything's for sale, Elias, especially for a man who's losing his grip." Elias took one slow step toward him. "That land belonged to my father and his father, and theirs before them. You can turn your horse around." Jeremiah didn't move. Instead, he leaned down slightly and said in a voice low enough to carry threat, "Careful now. If you keep losing things around here, someone might think you don't know how to take care of what's yours." Then he tugged the reins, wheeled his horse around, and galloped off as if he owned half the county. Elias stood frozen until the thunder of hooves faded. But the damage was already done. A seed of doubt, a whisper of fear, a shadow of suspicion, and one question heavier than all the rest. How did Jeremiah know the necklace was gone? That wasn't the last encounter. 2 days later, Elias went to town for supplies. It was unusual for him to go during winter storms, but he was out of rope, nails, and feed, necessities he couldn't postpone. Inside the small hardware store, his old friend Caleb Turner spotted him. "Elias, you all right? You look like you're carrying the whole ranch on your back." Elias tried to smile, but Caleb saw through it. "What happened?" Elias hesitated. Then in a low, tired voice, he said, "Mama's cross is gone." Caleb's face fell. "Gone? You sure you didn't drop it inside the house?" "Caleb, I've turned that house upside down. I've searched the barn, the pastures, the stalls. I've looked everywhere. It ain't there." Caleb paused, then asked carefully, "You think someone took it?" Elias didn't answer. He didn't have to. Caleb's expression hardened. "Elias, Jeremiah's been talking. Not real kind things neither." Elias's stomach twisted. "What's he saying? That you're slipping, that maybe it's time someone else took over parts of your land. He's been poking around folks, asking questions about you." Elias exhaled slowly. "Course he has." Caleb placed a hand on his shoulder. "You want me to talk to him?" "No." Elias shook his head. "If he stole anything, God sees it. And God handles things better than we ever could." Caleb nodded, but worry clouded his eyes. The next confrontation came unexpected. Elias returned to the ranch late that afternoon and found footprints by his barn, fresh ones, and not the pattern of his own boots. He followed them around the side of the building and stopped cold. One of his saddles lay in the dirt, ripped open, as if someone had searched it. Elias's breath shook. He knelt beside it, checking for damage, checking for anything missing. Rust snorted loudly in his stall, uneasy, pacing. Elias stood, fists clenched. There was no doubt now. Someone had been on his property. Someone had been looking for something. The necklace. He closed his eyes, whispering, "Lord, why? Why now? I'm doing my best. I'm trying to keep this ranch alive, trying to honor my mama. Why is this happening?" The only answer was the wind, moving through the barn boards like a long sigh. That night, long after the sky had turned black and the ranch had settled into an uneasy quiet, Elias sat in his kitchen and forced himself to breathe evenly. He thought of his mother's last words. He thought of her Bible. He thought of the cross resting against her chest in the old photograph. A flood of memories washed over him. Her voice, her hands, her prayers. And then, with tears he didn't try to wipe away, he whispered, "Lord, I don't understand this trial, but I trust you. I trust your timing. Don't let me lose myself in this. Don't let anger take root. Give me patience. Give me peace. Show me what I'm supposed to learn." When he finished praying, a strange calm drifted over him, like someone laying a warm hand over his heart. But the injustice wasn't finished yet. The storm had not yet reached its hardest point. For before God could lift him up, the schemes of the unjust had to fall. The morning Jeremiah Collins's schemes began to unravel wasn't dramatic or loud. No storm, no shouting, no confrontation in the middle of town. Just the quiet, steady way truth tends to rise, slow at first, then unstoppable. It started with Caleb Turner. The day after Elias prayed for patience and clarity, Caleb went into town to pick up feed. While loading his truck, he overheard two ranch hands talking behind the store. One said, "Jeremiah's been strutting around bragging he's gonna own Dawson's North pasture by New Year." The other replied, "Man's been flashing some kind of silver necklace, saying it belonged to the Dawsons. Said Elias dropped it 'cause he's losing it." Caleb nearly dropped the sack of feed he was carrying. A cold anger rose in him. Anger not born of vengeance, but of justice. He stepped around the corner and said, "Mind showing me that necklace?" The ranch hands froze, wide-eyed. One stammered, We don't have it. Jeremiah showed it to us earlier. That's all." Caleb's voice was steady. "Did he now?" Without another word, Caleb slammed his truck door shut and drove straight to Sheriff Harlan's office. The sheriff listened carefully, leaning back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Harlan," Caleb said, "you know Elias. He wouldn't misplace that necklace. And Jeremiah, he's been looking for reasons to get his hands on that land for years." Harlan nodded slowly. "Sounds like it's time I paid Jeremiah a visit." Jeremiah wasn't expecting company. When Sheriff Harlan rode up to the Collins ranch, Jeremiah came out of the barn wearing that same cocky grin. "Well, Sheriff, what brings you—" Harlan cut him off. "Jeremiah, I'm here about the cross necklace you've been showing folks." Jeremiah blinked, then smirked. "Just found it on my property. Ain't my fault if Elias—" "I didn't ask where you say you found it," Harlan said, voice firm. "I asked to see it." Jeremiah hesitated. His grin faltered. For the first time in a long time, he looked unsure of himself. Finally, he reached into his coat and pulled out the silver cross. Harlan took it carefully, inspecting the tiny engraving on the back, the initials M.D. Martha Dawson. He looked up. "This belonged to Elias's mother. Everyone in this county knows that." Jeremiah swallowed hard. I didn't steal it. I just—" "Jeremiah," Harlan said sharply, "you've been trespassing on Elias's property, stirring up trouble and lying about it. And I'll tell you something else. People are talking in town. Folks don't take kindly to a man who tries to tear down his neighbor for profit." Jeremiah's bravado collapsed right there in the cold morning air. His shoulders sagged, his face drained of color. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. Harlan holstered the necklace. "That depends on you. You can return the cross, stay off Elias's land, apologize like a decent man, or you can face charges for trespassing and theft. I'll give you a choice." "But only one," Jeremiah didn't argue. He didn't swagger. He didn't smile. He simply nodded, small, defeated. The sheriff turned his horse around. "Think about the kind of man you want to be, Jeremiah. Pride's a bad trail to ride." Jeremiah watched him leave, the weight of his own choices finally settling on his shoulders like a long overdue burden. And just like that, without drama, without fists, without revenge, the unjust began to fall by the quiet, steady hand of truth. Not by Elias' doing, not by anger, but by the natural consequences of deceit, by the very trap Jeremiah had set for someone else. Meanwhile, Elias knew none of this. He spent that day alone, repairing a broken latch in the barn, praying under his breath for strength he couldn't see yet. He didn't know justice had already begun moving toward him. He didn't know God was already restoring what was lost. But he would soon, for the Lord never lets injustice stand for long, and what was taken from him was already on its way home. The morning the blessing arrived began quietly, almost too quietly for a winter day on the Dawson ranch. The sky was pale, washed in soft gold. Frost shimmered on the fences like a thin layer of silver dust. Even the cattle, usually restless in the cold, stood still as though sensing something sacred in the air. Elias stepped out onto the porch with a weariness that went deeper than tired muscles. Days of searching, working, and praying had worn him thin. His chest felt heavy without the cross against it, so light in weight, yet so enormous in meaning. He wrapped his coat tighter around him and whispered, "Lord, if you're still teaching me something through all this, I'm listening. I don't know the reason, but I trust that you do." The wind drifted past him, gentle rather than biting, a small, warm breeze in the middle of winter. He frowned. "Strange," he murmured. Rust, his horse, raised his head sharply. Ears pointed toward the long road that led into town. Not a nervous movement, but alert. Focused. Elias followed his gaze. Far across the pasture, a single figure on horseback approached slowly. The silhouette was familiar. A broad hat, a straight posture, a patient gait even on cold morning ground. Sheriff Harlan. At his side rode Caleb. Elias's heart tightened. Sheriff Harlan didn't just stop by, not without reason. He walked toward them as they dismounted near the gate. Caleb gave a tired smile. The sheriff looked calm, thoughtful, almost gentle. "Morning, Elias," Harlan said. "Morning, Sheriff. Caleb." Elias nodded, bracing himself. "What brings you two out this way?" Harlan reached into his coat pocket and didn't speak right away. Instead, he looked around the land. The barn, the frost-tipped grass, the quiet cattle as though acknowledging the years of history etched into the soil. Finally, he said, "I think this belongs to you." He opened his hand. The world stopped moving. Lying in the sheriff's palm, glimmering softly in the morning light, was the silver cross necklace, his mother's cross, engraved with M.D., a tiny swirl of her handwriting captured in metal forever. Elias's breath broke on a whisper. "Lord Jesus." His hands trembled as he took it, fingers curling around it like a man grasping a lifeline. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. His vision blurred. The cold air stung his eyes, but the warmth rising from deep inside him felt holy, pure, overwhelming, like grace itself settling on his shoulders. He pressed the cross to his chest, near his heart, and closed his eyes. "Thank you. Thank you, Father. Thank you." His voice cracked under the weight of emotion. Caleb stepped forward, placing a steady hand on Elias's back. "No one's taking what belongs to you, friend, not while we're around." The sheriff nodded firmly. "Jeremiah had it, and he admitted it, said he found it on his land, though we all know better." Elias looked up, eyes shining. "I didn't want revenge. I just wanted it back. I just wanted something of her with me." Harlan nodded. "And you got it back. not by force, not by anger, by truth, and by the Lord's timing. Something shifted in the air, a moment subtle and sacred. As Elias fastened the cross around his neck again, the sun broke through the morning clouds in a single beam of gold, falling directly over him, the sheriff and Caleb. The warmth was sudden, unexpected, almost unnatural for December. The animals in the pasture stilled. Rust snorted softly and bowed his head. Even the wind paused. It felt holy. Elias looked to the sky, tears finally freeing themselves, and whispered, "You never arrive late, Lord, never." The sheriff gave a small nod, as though he too felt something beyond the visible world moving around them. Caleb exhaled deeply. "Well, if this ain't God's hand on a cold December morning, I don't know what is." Elias smiled, a slow, grateful smile that felt like it came from someplace deep in his soul. For the first time in weeks, the weight lifted. The ranch didn't feel lonely anymore. The air didn't feel heavy. The land didn't feel tired. Something had changed. Peace, not just the feeling but the presence, had come home again. And as he stood there with the cross resting warm against his heart, Elias knew without doubt God's timing, especially at Christmas, was perfect. Always perfect. In the days that followed, the Dawson Ranch felt different, not because the weather warmed or the work lessened, but because peace had settled over the land like a soft blanket. The kind of peace that doesn't come from answers, but from trust. Elias moved through the house with a lighter step, humming old hymns his mother used to sing. He polished the wooden nativity set, hung the lanterns on the porch, and placed a simple wreath on the door. Nothing fancy, just honest, humble Christmas simplicity. And each time the silver cross brushed against his chest, he whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude. Not because the necklace was valuable, but because God had used its loss and its return to teach him a deeper truth. Faith is not proven in seasons of ease, but in the cold days when hope seems missing. He realized something else too. The ranch, with all its weariness and wind and work, wasn't a burden. It was a blessing, a place where every sunrise, every quiet night, every creaking board reminded him that God walked with him in the ordinary. And he remembered his mother's words, "Son, the Lord never lets go, not of land, not of truth, not of you." So when Christmas morning came, soft and still across the Texas plains, Elias stepped outside, breathed the cold air deeply, and smiled at the sky. Some treasures can be stolen, some can be lost, but what God guards cannot be taken, and his timing always is perfect. If this story touched your heart today, let it remind you of something simple and powerful. What God allows to leave your hands, he can return in ways far greater than you imagined. Elias thought he had lost the last piece of his mother, but God was working quietly, behind the scenes, in the silence, in the timing only he can orchestrate. And when the moment was right, the blessing returned. Maybe you're waiting for something too. A prayer unanswered, a door unopened, a hope delayed. But listen carefully. Delay is not denial. Silence is not absence. And God's timing is never late, not even by a second. So if this story reminded you that he still restores what is lost, protects what is precious, and moves even when we cannot see, then write in the comments, "I trust God's timing." Your words may be the encouragement someone else needs today.